What are 10 things you love about you? Because what we want to do is have the world tell us who we are. And when that happens, like you talked about with your CEO or your athlete, the guys who transition well from one position to another are guys who know who they are going into it,
Absolutely.
and they're more than the thing that they're doing. But the challenge is a lot of times we don't understand that because we're trying to make our careers, our life, our incomes make up for a feeling of lack on the inside. And so the second thing is that celebration list. Hey, what do you celebrate about you? You have value, you have worth, you have things that are good about you apart from what you do. And then we get into the accomplishments. Give me 10, a list of 10 things, accomplishment that you had in your life. Because a lot of times, I'm not sure if you know of guys like this, but in my own life, it's always the next thing that matters,
Yes. Yes.
right? And the challenge is most of the times it's because that next thing is finally the thing that's going to prove that I'm worth it, that
Yeah.
I'm a person of value, that I can measure up, that I'm good enough. Again, from my perspective with my dad, trying to measure up to a father that you never could. But
Absolutely.
in that place, we never give ourselves credit for the things that we've already done. So the next thing is always that one. And what happens is you get there and find out that it's fleeting, it's empty, it's nothing, because now all of a sudden, right, either you're dealing with fear of failure like I was, where it's like, oh, you were lucky that time.
And now, a few minutes with two of my friends who will soon be yours, the Techie and the Cowboy.
Hello, hello. My name is Alastair Hunt with the Techie and the Cowboy. I am the Techie. The Cowboy is not here today, so I'll be filling both roles. I don't know how well it is I can fill the Cowboy role, but I'm going to try my best just after running this podcast for 5 years and do both sides. But T.W. Lawrence is the Cowboy, so he's here in spirit with us. But we have a special guest. And we wanted to be able to respect his time and make sure as we get him on, we got a chance to be able to have a conversation. We actually connected through a website where it is that podcast guests are connecting with podcast hosts. But we believe everything is by divine connection and nothing is by accident. So I think that's us connecting. And he actually reached out to me like almost a year ago. And I went back on and I checked my messages and then we reached out, we started messaging and then we got on and we just hit it right off. But his name is Mark Collins. He's a pastor and a coach. And his book is called Life Mastery, Living Life by Design and Not Default. Coach, Pastor Mark, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Alastair. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Okay, so we had a lot of discussion in our offline call because we had so much to talk about, and I kind of told you the whole point of the Techie and the Cowboy is men talking about things in their faith that they normally don't talk about. But
Yeah.
in talking to you, you talked about men living life at a different level once it is that they break through. So tell me a little bit about kind of your passion, how it is that you got into coaching, and then most importantly about your book and how it is that you believe that'll impact people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking. And well, that's a lot to unpack, but I'll try and do it pretty quickly. Like you'd said, I think my passion is really to see men unleashed as the heroes in the life that they're created for. And there's guys that are out there who are doing great things. So what I'm not saying is that men are living less than the lifestyle that God has created them for. But there are those moments and times and areas and places, right, where we are, where we're kind of in neutral or we're living by default, as I say in the title of my book. And that's actually where the title came from, living life by design, not by default. What I found in my own life, which was part of my long journey from right what I call from hurt to healed or from in bondage to freedom. What I found in that journey for myself was I was living by default, which means this: life happens and then I respond. And that's actually kind of the norm, right? Life happens and I respond. I get a flat tire or I have a relational issue or have a challenge at my job. And then, as a Christian man, I find the scriptures that best suit that issue. And then I start to memorize them and quote them and pray them and cast out demons and do all these things. And I'm not disparaging any of that. There's good in those things. But I believe that God calls us for more, as I saw in his scripture and as he was raising up men to save nations, to save the world, his son Jesus Christ. What I saw was men that were living life by design. They were impacting the world, not letting the world impact them. And that's what I wanted for my own life, which again, during that longer journey of figuring it out myself, creating my own blueprint to be able to live it out. And then that blueprint turned into Life Mastery, Living Life by Design, the book. as well as a course that I use to really help men kind of find that place of freedom in their own life, the life mastery that I believe God's called us to.
Now, is this a self-guiding course, like they actually log in and then they go along week by week, or is it something that you interact with them? How does the course work?
That's a great question. So what I wanted to do was first off, give them everything they needed.
Okay.
In my own journey, I started off with personal development, with Tony Robbins, with Dale Carnegie, with all the books and the courses and the things I could afford, because there was this passion on the inside to find the guy that I thought I was created to be.
Absolutely.
Not the guy that I was living out, not the guy that was worried about, fear of failure or struggling in a relationship or really kind of not engaging in his life at the highest level. But this person on the inside that I felt I was more than the life I was living. And so personal development was where I started. But then as I became a Christian and started to see the instructions of God and started to actually apply them to my life, which was a revelation to me that it wasn't just philosophy that you spew out and put on bumper stickers and say in times of stress, but it was actually instruction God gave to actually live out that life. I started to write it down. I created the whole roadmap, and that's where the whole course came from, was that place of, hey, this matters, and this is how it happened in my life, and this is how I was transformed. I want to get this in front of guys. So yeah, it's a fully comprehensive course from start to finish. I call it the blueprint towards freedom. And part of it is that. The other part is one-on-one coaching. So what I wanted to do was to give guys the thing I didn't have.
Right.
Because you're initiating a course, and I think it was God led. There was not that person to come alongside and say, hey, here's the faster route to that place.
Yeah.
Here's the easier, better understanding, so that you don't have to mull the thing over. You don't have to figure it out on your own in weeks. You can have actually one conversation and have yourself catapulted into that next level of what you're trying to do. So that's where the one-on-one coaching came in. And we also have a Facebook group, and that really is kind of the community part of it. One of the things that guys sometimes don't do well is community.
Yeah.
Is to be around other guys and to really actually be in a place where you can admit that, hey, there's something going on in my life, or there, I'm not perfect. One of those issues and challenges that most men work with. And so the Facebook group, it gives you that place for a community, for easy answers, to be around guys, right? That camaraderie of guys doing the same thing, walking through the same journey, fighting the same battles, getting the same victories. That's where the Facebook group came in as well. So yeah, the community aspect where you're working and running alongside other guys doing the same thing. You have the one-on-one coaching for the accelerated learning, and you have the fully encompassing course that you can take at whatever speed you want to, as long as transformation happens. That's God's call, right, on our life, is transformation, not change. Change is just me creating new habits for me to kind of manage my own life. Yeah. Transformation is me actually becoming the person I'm created to be, so I can live that life out and have the fulfillment that God promises.
So I know there's a lot to unwrap in the book and the course, but take us through that beginning stage of that self-discovery, that moving from as men, because we had this conversation as men, we're the provider, we're the husband, we're the boss. If we have people underneath us, employee, we have to be able to be the financial provider for the house as well, the problem solver, the disciplinarian, all these hats, right? And we tend to compartmentalize them into boxes until they start to bleed over into each other, right? But the big thing is that we don't have Christ in all of the boxes, right? And that we're not being Christ-led, we're being situation and put out fires led.
Yeah.
So that transition from from where it is that you're at now to where it is that God wants you to be and who God has called you to be, kind of just give us a brief overview of how that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And it comes down to one word: identity.
Yeah.
So the very core of what we talk about, and so I have two pillars in life mastery. There's lots of things that we teach, and modules and exercises and strategies, but it really comes down to this: who are you created to be? Because the minute you start to understand who you're created to be, you have the life you're created for. And what that does for us is take you a step back from what you're doing. Because what I tell the guys, and what is the truth that you already know, Alastair, is this: I am not my job. I am not my vocation. I'm not my titles. I'm not my role. I'm not my income. I'm not my attributes. I'm not the things on the outside. There's this created value. We say it and we even preach it sometimes, but we don't understand it or live it. Because, it's the natural thing to do. Guys wear many hats, and it's good that we do, because there's a role that we have that is vastly important. But the problem is we start to identify at it like it is my job is my role. I was talking to a guy 2 days ago, was a firefighter, and then he, transitioned into another role, and that was a, I'll say it, scary time for him because he was that role, right? There comes, attributes along with it, and there comes acknowledgement of who you are and those things, and it's all of us where we feel like without my thing, who am I? Well, the truth is, without your things, you're amazingly exactly who God created you to be. And so what we do is take a step back and say, hey, identity is everything. For me, I bring the guys into some resources and some strategies. And the first one is this: write it down. Who are you? Who are you created to be? Apart from your stuff, who are you? Not just who you think you are, but hey, who does God say you are? As a Christian, my hope is that, and my invitation and instruction is, start with that conversation. Hey, God, who did you make me to be?
Mm.
Because we find our value in our roles, but really your role is just you being lived out. It's not who you're created to be.
Right. And it's funny because they're so stuck in their situational dealing with things that they don't take
Yeah,
the time to even think, or they may have never even thought that way. I deal with a lot of athletes that I coach, and their identity is whatever sport they've spent their whole life training,
yeah,
being, preparing. That's all it is that they know. And then they have
yeah,
a devastating injury, or they can't play, or something happens, and they go in this spiral and this spin because they literally don't know what to do. Well, maybe I should become a coach, or maybe I should become a broadcaster because that'll still keep me close to the thing that I thought I was designed to do. And then they realize they don't like doing that. And then they go into this whole depression, looking for different outlets that are unhealthy type of spin and spiral because
yeah,
they put their identity in that one thing. And it's not just that. It's, you have big CEO corporate people who it is that have been big CEO corporate people for their whole entire life. And now all
right,
of a sudden they get laid off and their identity is shattered of what they thought they were or who they
yeah,
thought they were. So they're still chasing that next position that's going to get them back there. But maybe it is that they're older now and they can't get the same position that they got based off of their years
yeah,
of experience, right? And so
absolutely.
that's what really got me excited about working with men is because you have all these different things, and then we're designed. Don't show your feelings. Don't show your emotions. Never let them see you sweat.
Yeah,
Vulnerability is against everything that, and especially the older cultures we were brought up
yeah,
as, right? Be
yeah,
tough. You know what I mean? You don't want to be a punk. All these different little things that were said to us that live in our subconscious that we have these tapes running over and over again that tells us we can't be vulnerable. So now when
yeah.
it's time to do that, we put up those walls and it's really difficult. So for men who are there, men who are in this spiral already, what's the first step of them breaking through it and realizing that I got to shift my paradigm?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's two things. And if I could take the second one before the first, that place of vulnerability is interesting because, I was that guy. My dad, I grew up with a father who was in the military. We traveled quite a lot. And, I tell people this about my dad. He wasn't a drill instructor, but he would have been a great one because he's like, I don't know if your dad was the same way, Alastair. My dad was that kind of stoic, old school, kind of tough, nuts and bolts kind of guy who, don't show pain, don't show hurt, don't show anything. The challenge is, as a father, when you're not showing anything to your son growing up, you give him first off a model that he'll never be able to emulate
Right.
and be healthy. But you also create a divide between yourself and your son.
Absolutely.
And so what we don't realize is that some of those vulnerabilities are really us opening ourselves up so we let them in to know us. And as a father, that's one of the biggest roles you can have is allowing your son to know you, because in that place you start to hand off the mantle of true manhood.
Right.
And so in my own life, I was that guy. I was trying to follow after him. I was trying to measure up to a man who I didn't know if he respected or loved or, felt that I was doing a great job. I wasn't until I was in my 40s to the first time I heard my dad say that he was proud of me.
Same here.
And that's a lot of years of career and life that you've lived.
Yeah.
And it all stopped at one time. I'm not sure if we should unpack it here, but when my wife and I were expecting twins and we lost them,
Mm.
um, through some complications and some issues, our daughters died.
Wow.
And it was in that journey of grief and recovery from that, and trying to wrestle with, your expectations of life versus the results that you were given, that I was done with it. Because that place of being a stone wall, right, where you're trying to, nothing matters, nothing hurts, I'm just going to plow my way through it. it didn't do anything to comfort me, to help me, to allow me to walk forward in that time. And so for me, I understood a stark contrast between being that guy who can't feel anything and somebody who can finally let something in so that you can be honest about where you're at. Vulnerability isn't you trying to have those soft, squishy, girly emotions. It's being honest about where you're at, and it's being honest with somebody around you, not carrying the burden yourself.
Absolutely. And it's amazing because that's whenever we talked about those boxes that we compartmentalize in those
Yeah,
times of extreme grief or whatever, that's when those walls of those boxes start to break down and things start to bleed into one another, whether you choose to or not, right? Most of the
yeah,
time, in the
absolutely.
least opportune times is whenever it is that stuff starts to be able to bleed over. But I also believe that that's whenever it is that we are vulnerable enough internally where God can step in and do his work, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you have your back against the wall or whenever it is that you're at your most vulnerable state is where God can really wrap his arms around you and say, okay, so are you ready now? Are you ready now? I've,
Yeah,
I've been waiting. So are you ready now? Because, I'm the answer. And I think
yeah.
that's powerful when that moment happens.
That's really good. And then that compartmentalization part, the first part that you talked about, it really is us putting our lives into these compartments that we can manage, that we can control. And the challenge with that is, control is a great indicator of a guy who's insecure. By the way, that's exactly the guy who I was. All of these emotions, anger, insecurity, worry, stress, shame, they're not indications that you're somebody that's got a problem. They're indications that you're a person struggling with some identity issues. And in that place, again, we start with identity. Everything comes from identity. So I give guys 3 exercises. Your I am statement, who are you? Write that down. The second is give me a list of 10 things that you celebrate about you, not about your accomplishments, not about your achievements, but you as a man, you as a person. What are 10 things you love about you? Because what we want to do is have the world tell us who we are. And when that happens, like you talked about with your CEO or your athlete, the guys who transition well from one position to another are guys who know who they are going into it.
Absolutely.
And they're more than the thing that they're doing. But the challenge is a lot of times we don't understand that because we're trying to make our careers, our life, our incomes make up for a feeling of lack on the inside. And so the second thing is that celebration list. Hey, what do you celebrate about you? You have value, you have worth, you have things that are good about you apart from what you do. And then we get into the accomplishments. Give me 10, a list of 10 things, accomplishment that you had in your life. Because a lot of times, I'm not sure if you know of guys like this, but in my own life, it's always the next thing that matters,
Yes. Yes.
right? And the challenge is most of the times it's because that next thing is finally the thing that's going to prove that I'm worth it, that
Yeah.
I'm a person of value, that I can measure up, that I'm good enough. Again, from my perspective with my dad, trying to measure up to a father that you never could. But
Absolutely.
in that place, we never give ourselves credit for the things that we've already done. So the next thing is always that one. And what happens is you get there and find out that it's fleeting, it's empty, it's nothing, because now all of a sudden, right, either you're dealing with fear of failure like I was, where it's like, oh, you were lucky that time. But this next one, you're going to blow it and they're going to see that you're a failure, or you're going to just be a failure, right? Or it's this thing of, it wasn't everything I was hoping it would be. I thought I would feel better about myself. I thought I would feel good enough after this one. But people who are looking for their outside accomplishments, right, the next thing to be the thing, never find that it's satisfying. But guys who can look back and say, hey, I've got a track record of accomplishment. I'm not a failure waiting to happen. I'm not a guy that has to continuously prove who I am. I can be a person who recognizes that I'm already doing things, and therefore I could just live out from that place. And the accomplishments come because that's who I am, not because I'm trying to prove something to other people or myself.
And also, whenever you make a shift, because I had this probably about 4 years ago. No, it's probably about 6 years ago, right? Whenever it is that I turned 40, right? Which I just revealed my age, right? So, right whenever I turned 40, I had this shift where it wasn't about, like you said, achievement, but it was about legacy. Right. So
Yeah.
whenever it is that you're working to be able to accomplish, to be able to make a difference in other people's lives and in your family's lives, it's different than whenever you're working for a goal. I mentor a lot
Yeah.
of young men, and the way I put it in perspective for them is there's always going to be a faster car, a more expensive car, a bigger house, somebody who makes more money, a bigger deal to be able to land. So if that's what you're chasing, you're never going to be able to achieve it because there's always something else that you can chase. But
Yeah.
whenever it is that you are doing it for the right reasons, whenever it is that you are moving forward for the right reasons and walking in purpose and achieving your
Yeah.
true purpose that God has you, it's effortless. Like there
Yeah.
is no goals or whatever else. And it's just whenever it is that you're walking in the spirit, it's amazing the doors that open up, the people that are put in your life, the divine connections that are made, like us being
Yeah.
on this podcast. It becomes a little bit less stressful to be able to achieve whatever it is that you want to be able to achieve because you realize that you're just walking in your purpose.
Absolutely. And I love what you said about that, about being effortless. Because what I tell guys is life mastery is actually easy. It's the easiest thing you can do. It's literally me living from who I'm created to be, living out the passion and the calling on my life. The challenge is when you're not living it, what I call not living in freedom, right? It comes from the scripture when Jesus said, "He who the Son sets free is free indeed." We understand the salvation message of freedom. We don't understand the lifestyle we're supposed to live. And in that place, we don't realize that freedom looks like something in every area of your life. But walking in freedom is easy. It's literally me just being me, like you're talking about with the endeavors that you guys have and all that you're doing, Alastair. It's not that hard work doesn't happen. It's not that challenges don't come up. It just means that I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be doing exactly what I'm doing. And in that place, the energy comes and the passion comes and the ideas come and the solutions come. It's an easy place to be when you're living out of a place of who you're called to be. It's super stressful when you're trying to have all of your outside world measure up so that you can make up for the person you don't believe you are to begin with.
Yeah, because then you start trying to keep stuff, you start trying to keep
Yeah,
position, you start trying to keep image in your life. And those are all things that are not aligned with who you are, right? Those are aligned
amen.
with who it is that you think you should be or who it is that other people think you should be. You touched on
Yeah,
something that I want to go back to whenever you said that when people are told who they are for so long, they almost get addicted to that, right? So that's the other thing.
yeah,
You have this athlete that's had a coach their whole entire life. They've been in since Pee Wee football, and now they're pro football, and now they're retired
yeah,
out, and they're like, I just need somebody to tell me what to do, right? I need somebody to tell me what's next because that's how I've always lived my life. And I was like, well,
yeah,
what if you didn't have to listen to anybody? And they're like, I don't understand. They're like, what do you mean? They're like, so they'll go get a job where they have a boss because they still need that. I just tell me what to do. Okay, coach, tell me what to do next. Like, I'm not that kind of coach.
yeah,
My job is not to be able to coach you like the coaching that you're used to. My job is
yeah.
you to be able to have self revelations
That's
about what
really
it is
good.
that who it is that you are, and it takes them a second to wrap their brain around that because they've never lived life. But when they make that breakthrough, it's so amazing to kind of see, oh, okay. Yeah, I know who my coach is. There's only one,
Yeah,
right? There's only one, and he's going to reveal it to me, but he's not going to tell me what to do. He's going to show me what
yeah,
his purpose is in my life, and that's a different way of living. And it's
yeah,
again, it's a big, huge paradigm shift and a big, huge popping of the bubble. So whenever you say
yeah,
that you coach people through that, that excites me because we need more people like that. We need more people who are willing to take what it is that they've learned, take what it is that they've gone through, and be able to utilize that to help people shorten that process and not have to
yeah.
go through as much or get out of the spin that they're already in, right?
Yeah, and I love what you're saying because there's so much to unpack there. I think one of the things, the first thing is this: it's a trust issue,
Yeah.
right? So again, part of the life mastery journey is you're either living from your past, your experiences, your hurts, and the things that have been said about you, or you're living from who you're created to be. You're not doing both.
Right.
So you can't do some of one of the other because one of them will bleed into the other. And it's typically what my past tells me I am, my experience tells me I am, what my family, the people, even those things that were said that were hurtful and horrible about you, right? They all had an impact on your identity. In that place, sometimes we can feel we don't say it, but we don't trust ourselves. Even in Christianity, I don't want to throw stones at any kind of tradition, but isn't it interesting that in a lot of cases we treat the relationship with God as our father so much differently than we do with our earthly father?
Right.
As a dad, and you're a dad as well, Alastair, I know I'm raising my children to be adults. And what that means is I've got a 25-year-old daughter who's living with us at this time. And you know what she doesn't do? She doesn't ask me what she should be wearing. She doesn't ask me what time she should get up to go to work. She doesn't ask me how to pay her bills because she's grown up into an adult role. And yet, in our own relationship with God, we think it's righteousness to ask God the simple things. And what we don't understand is he trusts us sometimes more than we trust ourselves.
Right.
And again, in our earthly relationships, I just need you to tell me what to do, because the backside of that question is, I need you to tell me what to do, because if I do something, it may be a mistake. If I make the decision, it may be wrong. And in that place, you don't really trust yourself enough. So you need to be guided by somebody else. But the truth of the matter is, you're created for the things you're walking into. The fascinating thing about this word of God is, I've never seen him once in the whole of the Bible give somebody tools after they walked into a situation. He created them with those things that are in place, whether it was Moses or Gideon or Jesus or Paul or David, right? He didn't equip them after they were in the midst of the thing. He didn't bring them into something and tell them, okay, well, hopefully you'll figure this out and you're not really ready yet. But no, they were exactly ready. The challenge in our life is we don't realize that we're already ready for the circumstance that we're walking into. In fact, what I tell my guys is, you're the answer to the circumstance and the issues you're walking into. You just need to realize it, because God already knows it and he's trying to show it to you.
Getting out of your own way. And the funny thing about all the people that you mentioned, Jesus included, is that at some point they all had doubts. Like they all had doubts about what it is that God had in store for them. Some of which had walked and watched, Jesus do these amazing miracles and still had doubts after,
Yeah.
after all it is that they saw, all it is that they experienced, all it is that they felt. They still had doubts about what is God's purpose in my life. So if
Yeah.
those guys, experiencing that had doubts, imagine us here where it is that
Yeah.
society tells us that we're supposed to have doubts. I remember talking to a lady who it is that does the horoscopes and the star readings and everything else like that. And when you boiled it all down to, it was all down to is the people who come to her don't want to make the wrong decision. So they rather
Yeah.
have something else make the decision so they can blame it on that versus them trusting themselves to be able to make the best decisions for their lives.
Absolutely.
And I was like, wow, that was a kind of revelation, because I always wondered about that. I always wondered what makes people, read one newspaper that says everybody who reads this is going to have the exact same day, exact same week, all across
Yeah.
the world. But it just comes down to, do you have that trust? And if you don't have a faith base, then you definitely don't have that trust in God. But
Yeah.
even the people who have the faith base, do you have that trust that God is going to reveal to you exactly what it is that he has in plan for your life versus you trying to take it in your own hands or give it to, something like that? Very interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's interesting what I tell the guys in my life mastery course, or you can read in the life mastery book, is really what it comes down to. It's the meaning of my experience. It's not the experience, right? Because there's challenges. I shared a tragic experience in our life. It's not just the experience, but it's the meaning that you attach to it. And in most cases, for most people, most of the time in their life, the meaning isn't about the situation, it's about me in it. So that failure or that mistake that you're talking about, in the vast majority of cases, what it really is us saying that, I'm not, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I made this mistake. It's an identity that you add to the situation, which causes the emotion that you draw from it.
Yes.
But those guys, I mean, Thomas Edison, you've heard it said, I mean, he's used as an example thousands of times about, 99 times he had to create the filament for a light bulb. And somebody asked him, hey, you failed 99 times. He said, no, I found 99 ways not to do it.
Hmm.
And his whole scientific approach, according to one interview he had, was this: I just need to find all the ways that it won't work, and what will be left is the way that it will.
Absolutely.
His identity wasn't attached to his activity. He knew who he was, and he knew that he had in him the ability to create, in his case, a light bulb and all the other thousands of things that he created. But in our lives, it's an identity that says that if I don't measure up, then maybe I'm right about myself. I am a failure. But
Absolutely.
when you create an identity, again, back to the foundation, that's why at my course, we start with identity. And I tell people identity is everything, because when you know who you are, your circumstance, your life, and the outcomes can't lie to you about it.
That's it. That's it. And then you look at your life and everything that's happened to you, and you realize it's led you right up to where it is that you're at now,
Yeah.
which is where it is that God meant you to be. Without all of
Yeah.
the what I would have called back then failures and challenges and stumbles that I had in my life back then, there's no way that I would be able to be here sitting with you. And there's no way that this podcast would be able to get in the hands of somebody who it is that needs to be able to hear it. Right. And so everything has its purpose. Nothing is by accident. We, we,
That's great.
we just
And
got,
actually,
go ahead.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. We just got finished meeting with a lady who it is that we posted about what it is that we wanted to do with our new charity, helping wounded warriors.
Nice.
She saw it. She reached out and said, "Hey, I work with wounded warriors just north of you. You ought to connect." We missed each other. We were supposed to connect over and over again. And then we went up there to be able to see their facility. And she just got out of a major thing that happened with her husband. And I was able to pray for her at that time. All of those things had to happen in that order, the way they were supposed to happen, right? It
Yeah.
couldn't have happened any other way for us to be able to now connect with her and be able to help them do big things with that organization that helps veterans, and us being able to experience it on a day where it is that all the veterans were there. Everything is not by accident. Right? She's like, I don't know what made me reach
Yeah.
out to you. I just happened to shoot you a message. I didn't even think you were going to respond back. Right? I was like, that's because
Yeah.
it wasn't you. Right? So when we realize that it's never about us, if we, and like you said, and I wouldn't even say it's simple. I wouldn't even say it's easy. It's simple. The process becomes very simple on what it is that you're going to be able to do, and life becomes easier.
That's good. And I love what you're saying, Alastair, because I mean, I don't want to try and highlight, you too much and make you feel uncomfortable, but that is an exact answer and an example of what I was talking about and what you and I are both talking about. You were the answer to that situation. You didn't know it walking in. You didn't know whatever weeks, months ago, whenever it was that she initially reached out, or even before she did, and God prompted her heart, or however the circumstance happened that she said, "Hey, I need to reach out to it." But there were circumstances that, like you said, she was walking into that God already had an answer. That answer had your name attached to it. And I'm saying that obviously because that's a wonderful example. But for those guys who are out there who are trying to figure out, yeah, but what does this look like? Well, that's what it looks like.
Right.
A circumstance that somebody got blessed in or cared for, not because Alastair was studying his Bible for 10 weeks, was waiting and praying and fasting for something to happen. Not that any of those activities are bad, but literally, it's a chapter in my book and actually a lesson in my course. I tell the guys, your character is your calling. And what it looks like lived out is the things that you're doing, but it's who you are. Who you are is the answer. And what a great example you're showing of you being planted in that circumstance, that meeting, that time with that lady was an answer to prayer and was an invitation by God for an answer to come because of you and the life that you're living and who you are, who he created you to be.
And it's funny because whenever it is you start walking in the spirit, you become more aware of these opportunities and look
Yeah,
at them for what they are. Right? It could have been just a luck, circumstance. People call it, oh, it's a blessing that you're being here. But then you start looking at this is what it is that I was called to do. Right?
yeah,
This is what it is that I was called to do. Whenever God gives me opportunities, I could hear when she was talking about her husband and telling us the story, and she
that's
almost got
awesome.
in tears. I was like, can I pray for you? Right?
That's
I can
awesome.
tell right now it is that you need prayer. And I got to give shout out to TW, even though he's not here. He's one of the first people that taught me this. When we first met, we met at a conference, and people who have followed the podcast have heard the story before. We met at a conference, didn't want to get up from the table because we were pretty much lazy, and they told us to go walk around and meet people, and we were like, okay, I haven't met you. And then that turned into a prayer partner for the conference, which turned into this podcast. But when we were in the city during that week, because we were there for a week together, every time it is that we go to a restaurant, one of the final things he would ask anybody that we talk to is, what can I pray for you for? Right.
Wow.
And whether it's the person that's checking out or whatever else. And it's funny because people would stop and he would ask, oh, may I pray for you? As the first thing he would ask. And nobody said no. No,
Hmm.
even the non-believers, nobody really said no. And then he said, okay, so what can I pray for you for? And then they would tell us whatever their story is. And then whenever he prayed, it always
Hmm.
seemed just the right time to be able to do that. But it was the awareness that he had to just be able to ask a simple question, may I pray for you? And it didn't matter to him whether it is that there was people behind us or what I mean, that were holding up the line or
Yeah.
whatever else. He's like, this is my opportunity to be at least to do that. And I take it back. I think there was one lady that said no, not right now. And he said, okay, well, I'm gonna pray. Do you mind if I pray for you, even though you don't want me to pray for you now? Do you mind if I pray for you? And she said yes. And then he asked, and she told him, and then we continued to pray for her, aside from that, right? And so
Wow.
it's amazing the awareness that you have whenever it is, and me seeing that. Well, now here's the kicker. So after later on in the week, he would ask the question. I said, "Oh, he's going to ask the question." And he said, "So Alastair would love to pray for you. What could he pray for you for?" I was like, "Oh, wait, hold on. How did I get pulled into this thing?" You know? And I had to. One of the things that we talk about at Stephen Ministers, because that's where we were at Stephen Ministry Training, is how it is to pray out loud and how it is to pray in public. And it's not about you. If you have anxiety about that, praying for somebody, it's because you're worried about what you're going to say, what they're going to do. That's all about you. But when you take that off and you allow yourself to be a vessel and the Spirit to flow through you, you lose that anxiety about prayer. But even knowing that, when he said, now Alastair's going to pray for you, what can he pray for you for? I was like, whoa, I'm not prepared for this. You know? And so I got to give him kudos for that, because that was a huge lesson from day one for him, for me to realize it's not about me.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, so Mark, if somebody wanted to be able to book you as a coach, somebody wanted to be able to purchase the book, and we'll put the information with your website and everything, of course, in the comments below, but how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to be a one-stop shop. So the best way to get a hold of me is through my website, which is freedom-4-life.net. freedom-4-life.net, and that's where you can get the email. That's where you can purchase the book, or you can purchase it on Amazon, and that's where all of my paid courses are, and including I have a free, I call it a diagnostic tool, and it's a tool for you to be able to take 40 quick questions, score yourself in it, and say, hey, where am I at in my life mastery journey? And then what are the next steps I can take to get to that next level? So if you wanted to go on the website, you could also get a free tool to kind of assess where you're at and say, hey, what's the next thing I can do to be better in the areas of life that I want to grow in?
And we're definitely going to have you back on, because like you said, it's a lot to unpack in such a small one episode. I know there's more things that we want to be able to hit, but we also like to be able to give our viewers a chance to be able to send us questions, send us your questions, your feedback, your response. So that way it is that we can get with you and go back and kind of unpack some of the things that people are experiencing. That's when we have a guest that's super powerful. We love having them back after it is that we've gotten response or feedback, so that way they can expand on something that maybe you just brushed over. Somebody's like, whoa. That you took the Band-Aid off. So now I need to explore that a little bit more. But then, of course, you can always reach out to Mark directly as well, and I'm sure he'll be happy to be able to assist in any way that he can.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
thanks so much for the conversation and the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait to be able to have you back. And signing off, this is Alastair Hunt. We always encourage you to be able to like, subscribe, and follow us. But again, like I said, give us your feedback, give us your combats. That's what we really do this for, is because we love to be able to hear from our listeners and our viewers about exactly what it is that they need. Give us ideas of what it is that we could talk about on the Techie and the Cowboy itself. So, Mark, the way that we usually sign off is usually I say, my name is Alastair Hunt, the Techie. TW say his name is TW Lawrence, the Cowboy, and then we have our guests pick a name that they want to be as their sign off. So who are you?
Well, I'll use the name that I get a lot at my church. I am Mark Collins, the Freedom Pastor.
I like it. I like it a lot. Okay, so let's do this sign off the right way then. All right, guys. So thank you for listening to Techie and the Cowboy. My name is Alastair Hunt. They call me the Techie. My invisible cohort, TW Lawrence. He's the Cowboy, and we have
Mark Collins. They call me the Freedom Pastor.
Freedom Pastor. Thank you so much for being on, Mark, and we'll see you next time on the Techie and the Cowboy.
Thanks so much. Have a great one.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
That's it for this episode. Join us again next time for the Techie and the Cowboy. Hit us up on our website, thetechieandthecowboy.com. Let us know what y'all think.